This is the story of Emma and Michael, who learned that forever isn't about how long you love someone, it's about how deeply. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of their small apartment, casting golden streaks across the hardwood floor where wedding magazines lay scattered like fallen leaves. Emma sat cross-legged in her favorite oversized sweater, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands as she studied the intricate details of venues and flower arrangements. Her dark hair fell in gentle waves around her shoulders, and her green eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement that comes from planning a future with someone you love more than your own heartbeat. Across from her, Michael sat at his easel, paint-stained fingers working delicately on a canvas that captured the way morning light danced across her face. He had been painting her for 3 years now, ever since they had moved in together, but he never tired of trying to capture the essence of her beauty. The way her lips curved when she was lost in thought, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed at his terrible jokes. They had been together for 5 years and engaged for 6 months, and their love had evolved from the passionate intensity of youth into something deeper, more grounded, like roots that had grown so intertwined they could no longer imagine existing separately. The apartment they shared was small but filled with evidence of their life together. His paintings lining the walls, her books stacked in every corner, the mismatched furniture they had collected from thrift stores and garage sales, each piece carrying a story of their adventures together. Today was supposed to be about finalizing the details for their wedding, scheduled for the following spring, but Emma kept finding herself distracted by the way Michael's brow furrowed in concentration as he worked, the way his tongue peeked out slightly when he was focused, the way the morning light caught the golden flecks in his brown eyes that she had memorized long ago. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in October, when the leaves outside their window had turned the color of flames and the air carried the crisp promise of winter. Emma had been at work, teaching her 3rd grade class about the solar system, when her phone buzzed with a message from Michael asking her to come home early, that he had something important to tell her. She had assumed he wanted to surprise her with dinner, or perhaps show her a new painting he had finished. So she had hurried home with a smile on her face and a lightness in her step that would haunt her in the weeks to come. She found him sitting on their couch, still wearing the clothes he had worn to his doctor's appointment that morning, his hands clasped so tightly together that his knuckles were white. The expression on his face was one she had never seen before, a mixture of fear and devastation that made her stomach drop before he even spoke. He told her about the headaches that had been getting worse, the dizziness he had been hiding from her, the appointment he had finally made after she had begged him to see someone about his symptoms. He told her about the tests, the scans, the doctor's face when he delivered the news that would shatter their carefully constructed world into pieces. Glioblastoma, he said, the word falling from his lips like a stone into still water, creating ripples that would affect everything they had planned, everything they had dreamed of, everything they thought they knew about their future together. The tumor was aggressive, the doctor had explained, and while treatment options existed, the prognosis was measured in months rather than years. Perhaps 18 if they were fortunate, perhaps less if they were not. Emma had listened to his words with a growing sense of unreality, as if she were watching someone else's life unfold on a television screen. as if this could not possibly be happening to them, not now, not when they were so close to beginning the rest of their lives together. The weeks that followed were a blur of medical appointments, second opinions, and treatment plans that read like battle strategies in a war they never wanted to fight. Emma took leave from her teaching position, using her saved vacation days and personal time to accompany Michael to every consultation, every scan, every procedure. They learned a new vocabulary of hope and despair, radiation therapy, chemotherapy, tumor markers, quality of life, palliative care. The oncologist, Dr. Martinez, was kind but realistic, explaining that while treatments could potentially slow the tumor's growth and manage symptoms, they were fighting against one of the most aggressive forms of brain cancer known to medicine. Michael, who had always been the optimist in their relationship, the one who saw beauty in abandoned buildings and found four-leaf clovers in patches of dying grass, struggled to maintain his characteristic hopefulness in the face of such stark medical realities. Emma watched him grapple with the knowledge that his own body was betraying him, that the mind that created such beautiful art was under siege from within. She saw him looking at his paintings with a new intensity, as if trying to memorize every brushstroke, every color choice, every moment of inspiration that had brought them to life. The wedding planning that had once filled their evenings with joy and anticipation now felt surreal, like arranging flowers for a party that might never happen. They found themselves caught between the desire to proceed with their plans as if nothing had changed, and the practical reality that everything had changed, that their timeline for everything had suddenly become uncertain. Some days, Emma would catch Michael staring out the window with an expression of profound sadness, and she knew he was thinking about all the things he might not live to see, all the moments they might not share, all the dreams that might remain forever unfulfilled. After much discussion, tears, and sleepless nights spent holding each other in the darkness, they decided to move forward with a scaled-down version of their wedding plans. Instead of the large spring celebration they had originally envisioned, they would have a small ceremony in December, just before Michael was scheduled to begin his treatment regimen. Emma threw herself into planning with the same determination she had once applied to her lesson plans. But now every decision carried additional weight, because it might be one of the last things they would plan together. She contacted their families, explaining the situation with a composure that surprised even her, and found that crisis had a way of bringing out both the best and worst in people. Michael's parents flew in from Portland, his mother's eyes red-rimmed with tears she tried to hide, his father's usual jovial demeanor replaced by a quiet intensity that spoke of a man trying to process the unthinkable prospect of outliving his son. Emma's family rallied around them with the fierce protectiveness that had always characterized their clan. Her sister Sarah taking charge of flowers and decorations, while her mother focused on food and logistics. The guest list shrank from the 100 people they had originally planned to invite to 30 of their closest family members and friends. But somehow, the intimacy of the smaller gathering felt more appropriate, more meaningful, as if they were creating a sacred space for their love to be witnessed and blessed before the storm of treatment began. Michael continued to paint despite the increasing frequency of his headaches, creating a series of portraits of Emma that captured not just her physical beauty, but the strength and grace with which she was handling their crisis. He painted her, laughing over coffee in the morning, concentrating on lesson plans at the kitchen table, sleeping peacefully with her hair spread across the pillow. And in each painting, there was a luminous quality that seemed to glow from within, as if he were painting not just her appearance, but her very soul. The wedding took place on a snowy December evening in the small chapel where Emma's grandparents had been married 50 years earlier. The ceremony was simple but profound, with fairy lights strung along the wooden pews and white roses arranged in mason jars, creating an atmosphere of understated elegance that reflected their personalities perfectly. Emma wore her grandmother's vintage lace dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, and carried a bouquet of white roses and baby's breath that her sister had arranged that morning. Michael wore his father's navy suit with a white rose boutonniere, and when Emma walked down the aisle toward him, she saw tears streaming down his cheeks and knew that he was feeling the same mixture of overwhelming joy and heartbreaking sadness that threatened to overwhelm her own composure. The vows they had written together were different from the ones they had originally planned, more raw and honest, acknowledging the uncertainty of their future while affirming their commitment to face whatever came together. Michael's voice shook as he promised to love her, not just in sickness and in health, but in whatever time they had left, for however long that might be. And Emma's response was equally emotional as she vowed to stand by him through treatments and good days and bad days, to find joy in small moments and to never let fear overshadow their love. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was desperate and tender, a seal on promises they might not have years to fulfill, but were determined to honor for whatever time remained. The reception was held in the church hall, with Emma's aunt providing catering and Michael's college roommate serving as DJ, playing a mix of songs that traced the history of their relationship from their first dance to their current favorite late-night listening. Emma's father gave a toast that brought tears to every eye in the room, speaking about the courage it took to choose love in the face of uncertainty. And Michael's best friend followed with stories about their friendship that celebrated the kind of man Michael was and would always be, regardless of what lay ahead. The honeymoon was a long weekend in a cabin in the mountains, a place they had discovered during their second year of dating and had returned to every autumn since. The cabin was rustic and cozy, with a stone fireplace and windows that looked out over valleys painted in shades of gold and crimson. They spent their days hiking gentle trails that accommodated Michael's increasing fatigue, taking photographs of each other against backdrops of stunning natural beauty, and talking about everything and nothing in the way that couples do when they are completely comfortable in each other's presence. Emma had brought her camera and took hundreds of pictures, trying to capture not just the scenic beauty of their surroundings, but the way Michael's face looked when he was truly happy, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed at her attempts to build a fire, the way he held her close during the cold mountain nights. Michael had brought a small sketch pad and spent hours drawing Emma as she read by the fireplace, as she prepared simple meals in the tiny kitchen, as she slept curled up beside him in the early morning light. These sketches were different from his paintings more intimate and immediate, capturing moments of quiet domestic happiness that felt both ordinary and precious. They made love with a tenderness that spoke of their awareness of time's passage, holding each other afterward and talking in whispers about their hopes and fears, about the treatment that would begin the following week, about their determination to make every moment count. On their last night in the cabin, they sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching the stars and making wishes on falling meteors, both silently hoping that the universe might somehow hear their prayers and grant them more time together. Emma found herself memorizing the sound of Michael's heartbeat as she rested her head on his chest, the way his fingers felt as they traced patterns on her arm, the scent of his skin that had become as familiar to her as her own breathing. The treatment began in January with a combination of radiation and chemotherapy that left Michael exhausted and nauseous, but determined to maintain as much normalcy as possible. Emma returned to work part-time, finding that the routine of teaching helped her maintain some sense of stability while everything else in their lives felt chaotic and uncertain. Her students, with the intuitive sensitivity of children, seemed to understand that their teacher was going through something difficult, and they responded with an extra measure of sweetness and cooperation that touched her heart daily. Michael continued to paint when he felt well enough, though the treatments affected his coordination and sometimes left him frustrated when his hands would not cooperate with his artistic vision. Dr. Martinez had warned them that the treatments would be difficult, but the reality was harder than either of them had anticipated. There were days when Michael could barely lift his head from the pillow, when the nausea was so severe that Emma could only sit beside him with a cool cloth for his forehead and whispered words of encouragement. There were nights when they both lay awake, Emma listening to Michael's labored breathing and fighting the urge to call the doctor about every change in his condition. Michael struggling with the claustrophobia that had developed since his diagnosis, the feeling that his own body was a prison from which he could not escape. But there were also good days, days when the treatments seemed to be working, when Michael felt strong enough to walk to the park near their apartment and sit on their favorite bench watching children play, while Emma read to him from books they had been meaning to read for years. On these days, they would talk about the future in carefully measured terms, discussing plans for the spring and summer with the kind of cautious optimism that becomes second nature to people living with serious illness. They learned to celebrate small victories, a clear scan, a day without nausea, an afternoon when Michael felt strong enough to cook dinner together, a painting completed despite the tremor in his hands that had developed as a side effect of his medications. As spring arrived, bringing with it the daffodils Emma had planted in their small garden the previous fall, Michael's condition began to deteriorate more rapidly than they had hoped. The treatments that had initially seemed to slow the tumor's growth were becoming less effective, and Dr. Martinez gently began to introduce conversations about comfort care and end-of-life planning. Emma found herself caught between hope and acceptance, between fighting for every possible treatment option and recognizing that Michael's quality of life was declining in ways that made her question whether aggressive intervention was truly in his best interest. Michael himself seemed to be grappling with similar questions, and they began to have conversations that were both heartbreaking and necessary about what he wanted his final weeks or months to look like. He told her that he didn't want to die in a hospital surrounded by machines and strangers, that he wanted to be at home with her and his art and the life they had built together. He asked her to promise that she would not sacrifice her own health and well-being trying to care for him, that she would accept help when it was offered, that she would not feel guilty about needing breaks from the intensity of caregiving. Emma promised, though she knew in her heart that keeping such promises would be more difficult than making them. They decided to convert their living room into a bedroom so that Michael could remain part of the household activities even when he became too weak to climb the stairs to their bedroom. Emma's family helped with the transition, her father and brother moving furniture while her mother and sister organized medical supplies and created a system for managing medications and appointments. Michael's parents extended their stay indefinitely, taking turns sleeping on the couch and helping with practical tasks that Emma could no longer manage alone. The apartment that had once been their private sanctuary became a gathering place for family and friends who wanted to spend time with Michael while he was still able to enjoy their company. During these final weeks, Michael experienced a burst of creative energy that surprised everyone, including his doctors. Despite his physical limitations, he managed to complete several paintings that were among his most beautiful and moving work. One was a portrait of Emma sleeping, painted from memory during a night when insomnia had kept him awake but alert, capturing her peaceful expression and the way the moonlight fell across her face through their bedroom window. Another was a landscape of the mountain cabin where they had honeymooned, painted in colors that seemed to glow with inner light, as if he were painting not just the physical location, but the emotions and memories associated with it. He also painted a series of abstract pieces that seemed to capture the experience of living with terminal illness, the fear and sadness and unexpected moments of beauty that had characterized their journey together. Emma would find him painting at odd hours, driven by an urgency to complete these final works, as if he were racing against time to leave behind a visual record of his love for her and his appreciation for the beauty he had found in their life. Together, she began to understand that these paintings were not just art, but gifts, his way of ensuring that she would have tangible reminders of their love long after he was gone. The act of creating seemed to give him a sense of purpose and control in a situation where so many things were beyond his influence. And Emma encouraged his work, even when it meant he was spending energy he could barely spare. Friends and family members who visited during this time were struck by the intensity and beauty of these final paintings, and several asked if they could commission works or purchase pieces. But Michael politely declined, explaining that these particular paintings were meant for Emma alone. The end came more suddenly than they had anticipated. On a warm afternoon in late May, when the windows were open and the apartment was filled with the scent of the lilac bush that grew outside their bedroom window, Michael had been having a particularly good day, alert and talkative, even managing to eat some of the soup that Emma's mother had brought over. They had spent the morning looking through photo albums from their years together, laughing at pictures of themselves from their early dating days, marveling at how young they had looked and how much they had grown and changed together. Michael had been working on one final painting, a simple but profound image of their hands intertwined, and had managed to add a few brushstrokes before fatigue overtook him, and he settled back against the pillows Emma had arranged on the couch. They were watching an old movie, one of the classic romantic comedies they both loved, when Emma noticed that Michael's breathing had become more labored. She called his name softly, and when he didn't respond, she knew with a certainty that pierced her heart that he was leaving her. She held his hand and talked to him, telling him about her love for him, thanking him for the years they had shared, giving him permission to let go when he was ready. His parents and her family gathered around them, and in those final moments, the apartment was filled with quiet voices, sharing memories and expressing love, creating a circle of support that honored both his life and their collective grief. Michael died peacefully just as the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of gold and pink that reminded Emma of the mountain sunsets they had watched together during their honeymoon. Even in her grief, she was grateful that he had been able to die at home, surrounded by love, in the space they had created together and filled with evidence of their shared life. The months that followed Michael's death were a blur of practical arrangements and emotional upheaval that left Emma feeling as if she were living someone else's life. The funeral was a celebration of Michael's life and art, with his paintings displayed around the chapel and friends and family sharing stories that painted a picture of a man who had brought beauty and joy into the world despite his shortened time in it. Emma found herself comforted by the presence of people who had loved Michael, but also overwhelmed by the constant need to accept condolences and appear to be coping when she felt as if she were drowning in grief. The apartment felt simultaneously too empty and too full of memories, every corner holding reminders of their life together that could send her into tears without warning. Well-meaning friends and family members suggested that she might want to pack away some of Michael's belongings, but Emma found herself unable to change anything about their shared space. She returned to teaching in the fall, finding that the routine and the needs of her students provided a structure that helped her navigate the worst of her grief. But she also discovered that moving forward felt like a betrayal of the life she and Michael had planned together. The wedding gifts they had received were still in boxes in their closet, and Emma couldn't decide whether to return them or keep them as reminders of the future they had been denied. Michael's paintings took on new significance as the only tangible pieces of him that remained, and Emma found herself studying them with an intensity that bordered on obsession, trying to decode messages he might have hidden in the brushstrokes, searching for comfort in the visual evidence of his love for her. The painting of their intertwined hands, left unfinished on his easel, became a focal point of her grief and her healing, a reminder that their love story, while cut short, had been real and profound and worth every moment of pain she was experiencing in its aftermath. As the first anniversary of his death approached, Emma began to understand that healing would not mean forgetting Michael or moving on from their love, but rather finding a way to carry that love forward into whatever future she could build for herself, honoring their time together while accepting that her story would continue even though his had ended.